Hello, everybody. This is Gynarchy Awakening. I am back with another video. This is going to be a series of videos on where I think Gynarchy cannot come from. One of these is definitely, in my opinion, going to be uh, very hotly contested and debatable. But I don't think Gynarchy can come from the collective anger of Gynarchists or women or what have you. And the reason why is it'd be great, subject for like a manga or something. It'd be good for that. But when you come into the real world, you see that despite all the horrible things that men have done to themselves, to women, all the anger has generally been fueled and directed towards egalitarianism. In other words, women sharing power with men. And you even see this in the black community with respect to white people. You have black individuals, especially during the last riot, saying you're lucky that we want equality and not revenge. And so they're basically telling people that this is where the anger goes, right? That the anger goes towards, channels itself towards equality, the desire for equality. So the reason why I don't think anger works particularly well is the first reason why is you obviously, even though it can be a motivational force, it's also a force that can quickly turn to hate. It can poison your veins. So it's not good for your health to constantly be angry. It can really fuck things up in here. The second thing, the problem I have with this, and the reason why I know it doesn't work is because I have studied history and I have seen what happens to people who become too consumed by their own anger and hate to the point where they are blind to the people around them and their machinations. That being said, I think that as a community, if Gynarchists are going to learn from the past, they should start with the civil rights movement. And they should study very carefully the life of Malcolm X, or I think the last name is Shabazz, Mr. Shabazz. And why would that be? Because in his anger, see, this is the reason why I am far more, why I show more favoritism towards women as leaders than men. And it's because males have what are called, what generally, there are outliers and exceptions for every gender. I hope you understand that. I'm not saying that every woman is like this. I'm not saying every man is like this. I'm just saying in general, I find that women have this type of brain that differs from the male brain. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about fabric brains versus narrative brains. I can do a separate video on this if you wish. Please let me know, and I can go into detail about that and why I prefer women leadership over male leadership. It's just a personal preference. But when you get right down to it, when somebody has a narrative brain, it's actually easier to manipulate this type of individual. And the problem with the narrative brain is that usually they can only see or filter information through some kind of context that involves them against a concept or a person or an institution. And so everything that they're thinking about exists within those parameters. And what we saw happen in the life of Malcolm X, who was a very eloquent speaker, very intelligent, very observational, but what he could not have seen coming is something that modern psychologists have known about, studied about, is that there are individuals, and this is referring to Elijah Muhammad, the man who introduced him to Islam at the time. Now, the problem with Elijah Muhammad is he was introducing Malcolm with a text that was altered. In other words, he gave him the wrong version. In other words, an inauthentic version of the religious text. I don't remember if it was the Hadith or the Quran, but what I do know from some documentaries I watched is that in Islam they don't tolerate racism. In other words, if he went on a personal journey later in his life and he found out that he had been misled, and then he learned other things about Elijah Muhammad and separated, went his own separate ways. And what he didn't realize, of course, how could he, is that with a narrative brain, they get so caught up in their anger towards whatever it is that they're fighting that they don't always realize that the people they think are their friends are actually their enemies. The greatest irony of Malcolm X's life is that he spent his life trying to deal with the individuals who were exploited. He dealt with white people or communicated with white people about the economic exploitation of his community, but he was also being exploited by one of his own and being manipulated. And he didn't realize it, and by the time he did, it was too late. And most people have speculated that it was either Elijah Muhammad and some of the members of his organization who assassinated Malcolm X, and also that either the government was directly involved in it at the time, or they had allowed the operation to be carried out. In other words, they had advanced information and they chose to sit on their hands and not do anything about it because they thought it would be more advantageous for him to die. These are the general schools of thought on this. But see, when you are angry, and I was definitely angry when I found my first domina, and I started, feeling validated, but I didn't realize how much anger I was being fed because there are still people within our own community who think that anger is proper fuel, that you can use anger and that it can't infect you or it can't destroy the integrity of who you are, that it can't make you susceptible. But it can. It very easily can. I used to be in a very bad hate group. I used to have a lot of personal problems that were way, way, way worse than they are now. And the last thing I needed was for somebody to fuel that, to put fire on open oil. That was not a good solution to the problem. I also personally feel that when you are like this, when you are too far gone, you can't maintain an objective judgment of the people around you. You think, because you have a narrative brain, especially as a male, that, oh, well, that person says they're in the same situation I am, so why would they fuck me over, right? And this is something that can be very difficult to understand unless you picked a psychology textbook up, or if you've never studied people with serious personality disorders. But there are individuals, it doesn't matter what ethnic group they are, it doesn't matter what gender they are. What these individuals do, these predators, like Elijah Muhammad, is they recognize, they may even be one of the individuals who is disadvantaged by the political climate, by what at the time was the racial climate or tension. But instead of seeking solidarity in order to protect other people, they exploit the existing conditions to prop themselves up, to benefit themselves. In other words, they instead of trying to change the conditions, they take advantage of them. They feed into them so that they can get money or power or attention or prestige. And this is something that people have a hard time understanding, right? Because you think that when you're meeting up with these other people, right, that because they seem to be against the same enemies that you're against, they seem to be about solving the problem, right? And yet at the same time, you think that they are about solving the problem, that they are about this thing or that thing. It turns out that the only person that they're about is themselves. The only person they want to benefit is themselves. It's because these individuals have a lack of empathy and compassion for other human beings, and they can be very cynical minded. They can be very overtly critical, but they can also come across as very charming in conversation. They can make you laugh, and that's why it can be difficult to identify these individuals within any movement. And see, this is why I personally advocate against anger, because while it is okay to be angry about something, you should never allow yourself to be ruled by anger or hatred. Because then you have individuals like Elijah Muhammad who come along, and because you think they're saying what you want to hear, you think they're on your side. And that's just not true. And I know that can be difficult. That can be hard to explain. Like, how could it possibly benefit them to allow these conditions to continue, or to only offer the guise of an actual solution? You wonder, like, couldn't they be the victim of it? And what you have to understand, of course, is from their point of view, they might not care about how it affects other people. They just want people to think that they care how it affects their community. They want to be seen a certain way. It's the image that matters to them, because they want to cash in on that. They see themselves as a product to be marketed to other people. So they immediately dehumanize themselves and infect any community that they become a part of. And if you do not learn from the example of Malcolm X and what happened to him, the real tragedy of his life is that he thought his allies he thought that the people around him who were supporting him and guiding him were his allies, when in reality, they were some of his greatest exploiters. And when you have one of your own people exploiting you and using you, and you don't even realize it, that's a problem. That's a major problem, especially when their motives are clearly not motive. They don't care about improving material conditions. They don't care about trying to change the society for the better. They just want people to think that they are capable of that, that their rhetoric or their solutions will get them there. And if you can provide the illusion of hope, then people will latch onto it, because if somebody is suffering enough, somebody is going through enough pain, they will do anything to find something that can better that situation, something that can take them away from it. Anything. And I think that if you look at the background, you look at the individual's life, there are some people who are more susceptible to hate, to anger than others. I believe his father was lynched. His mother was sent to an institution. So I do think he had to grow up essentially at some point without either of his parents. That is not an easy thing to do. It's difficult. It's no wonder that he fell into the criminal underworld, and then eventually he made his way towards that guy. These individuals who have narrative brains are extremely susceptible, especially if their circumstances are as bad or worse than Malcolm X's was. And so, I feel maybe that there's a different perspective on this. Maybe there's a balance between anger and happiness. I just find that so often with human beings, anger is like a drug, and the more you feed it, the greater it grows. I don't personally believe that there's a balance between anger and joy. I think that anger is something that should be felt situationally, but not used as some kind of some kind of thing that you like pump in, like some kind of weird thing you pump into your system to give you energy or motivation. I just feel that the idea is very disturbing, and I think it leaves the community vulnerable. But if you disagree, I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.